Hello, everyone. I'm Lindsay Vastola and thrilled to be here today to introduce Dr. Emily Splichal. I've known Emily, I guess, for several years now. And what I love about Dr. Emily is she is able to take what is complex and make it simple. I know as a fitness professional, she's inspired me in so many ways. I've learned so much. She is a human movement specialist, a podiatrist. She has this ability to bring the medical perspective to the fitness industry. Her signature barefoot certification. She has, I didn't tell you this, Dr. Emily, but not 1 hour ago, and this is not a plug, everybody, I was not paid to do this. An hour ago, I received my son's insoles that I bought for him for his cleats because he's been having foot and knee and 9-year-old sports problems. So I use your products.
Thank you.
Yes. So again, not a plug that was intended, but I said, this is what the beauty, and I think those of you who have heard Dr. Emily, you know what a treat you're in for. Those of you who haven't, you are definitely in for a great presentation. So Dr. Emily, I'm going to turn it over to talk to us about exteroceptive and interoceptive sensory processing and the aging client. So I'm going to turn it over to you. You should have full access, and I'll see you at the end. For those of you watching live, use the chat box for any questions throughout the presentation, and we should have some time to address those at the end. Okay, all you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm just going to start my PowerPoint, share the screen, and then we will get started. Again, thank you for everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Lindsay, for such the kind introduction and for supporting Naboso. Pay you later. But I'm really excited to dive into the topic today, just because it's something that I'm really passionate about. And for those who have followed my work in the past, this is a continued evolution of how I look at the human body, how I think sensory input is so important to human movement and optimizing movement. So we're going to take a little bit of that journey towards the aging client, which of course is going to deal with falls to some degree, but we'll do it in an innovative spin. If you are unfamiliar with my background, in addition to what Lindsay had said, so I am a clinician, I'm a podiatrist, I'm also an educator. I founded the EBFA Evidence-Based Fitness Academy, or EBFA Global, which is an education company built around foot to core, from the ground up, fascia lines, breath to pelvic floor, really takes the importance of feet to an integrated perspective. And then I've authored several books. I'm actually writing another book that's called Sensory Sapiens that's launching towards the end of the year, so stay tuned for that. And then the founder of Naboso. Okay, so as we dive into this, one thing that I want you to think, kind of have in front of your mind when we're going through this, is that I know a lot of the lectures by other professionals are really built around falls. Falls are the #1 concern when you are dealing with someone who is past a certain age. And I know here in the United States, if you look at how big of an issue this is, the US healthcare system spends over $50 billion a year on healthcare costs that are associated with falls. So this is clearly a big issue. Now, if we look at, let's say, someone who has diabetes and neuropathy, if someone has neuropathy, and most of the studies have been done around diabetic, but when you have neuropathy and you lose sensation in your feet, you are at a 15 times greater fall risk compared to someone who is the same age but doesn't have neuropathy. And then what they actually start to see is that there's this connection between starting to lose a cognitive function or cognitive decline and what that does to your movement. So really what we are speaking about here is sensory perception, sensory stimulation, our ability to perceive sensory. And what we're going to be looking at today, which is really exciting, is it's not just about sensory perception to our external environment, meaning I feel the ground with my feet or I feel the table that I'm touching, but also looking at sensory as it relates to internal. And I kind of got into this topic, or I wanted to speak about this topic when I was speaking at the last Functional Aging Summit that was this summer. And I had done a lecture, and then I believe it was Cody who had asked and said, when you have someone who is, let's say 65 plus, has all these comorbidities, and your concern is to reduce falls and improve their movement, where do you start? Like, that's a very complex protocol and client to try to navigate. Well, we have to build strength, we have to build, foot awareness, we need to breathe the right way, we need flexibility, all of these things. And I was telling everyone that I typically start with reconnecting them to themselves. So can they orientate themselves in space? Do I feel myself? Or have I actually disassociated with my body that if I'm about to fall, I'm actually not perceiving shifts in my body fast enough because I've kind of disassociated from myself. And I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't quite yet, it will hopefully after this next hour. So let's jump into it. So some foundational concepts of what we're going to be exploring is that in all of your clients, especially the aging client, is that a foundation concept is that everything is built around survival. Survival meaning efficiency and protective mechanisms. So if I am in a very stressed state, I'm very anxious, I'm scared of falling, that's going to shift my perception of safety and survival. And I often will say that if you're working with clients or patients who have a history of falls, you really want to get the characteristics of that fall. Now, did they just kind of trip over the carpet and were able to get themselves back up, or were they on the floor for a long time? Imagine being on the floor and you live by yourself and you don't have the strength or flexibility or awareness to get your own self up. You'd feel a little bit abandoned, like I am stuck on the floor. What if no one finds me? What if this is it, right? So that's a different height level or threat level as far as the nervous system perceives threat. That client who fell in that type of scenario is going to have a different relationship to their future fall risk and to you navigating fall reduction programming with them. So we want to make sure that we're understanding and appreciating everyone's unique association to safety and survival. Sensory lays the foundation, right? So here we go. Survival is based on sensory perception, and then interpretation of that sensory perception, both internally and externally. And then the purpose is that we will modify things, movement, memory, and our mood to ensure safety. Or if you bring in sensory, you could actually modify movement, memory, and mood. And that's what we're going to be exploring. Just this slide is a snapshot of everything of how I look at my patients and really the next way that EBFA is growing and evolving. And then my upcoming book, Sensory Sapiens, is really built around this as well. Why is it so important that we need to be able to have this relationship with sensory stimulation? So now this concept of am I safe? What I want you to pull from that, this am I saved, is some key words which are I am, me. I can identify with myself and I feel my body. Now we connect with our perception of self when we are around 1 year old is when a child really connects to ownership of this is me, this is my arm. They look in a mirror, that's me. I look at a picture, that's me. You can start to connect to this word I am. Right? So then that self-ownership is very important when you're looking at all aspects of human function and human movement and human performance, is that we must have a deep connection to ourselves, because that ultimately goes to that root foundation of am I safe, or what is this survival, right? Everything is built around survival. Okay, so I am connection to self is built around your perception and awareness, both internally and externally. This perception and awareness, again, internal, external, a lot of people will focus on the external, but we will see that oftentimes the internal is almost more important than the external, or it is the neglected side of sensory relationships, especially in the aging population. And that's where we could see some opportunity for everyone who's listening to come in and help these individuals reconnect to that sense of I am. Okay, so let's take an exploration first through the external environment, which is going to be exteroception. This is our sensory perception of the external environment. You're thinking touch, you're thinking sound, you see sight, there's light. So everything related to that external environment. And then from that external environment, we will then bring it into its connection to its internal environment. Your external environment, or your exteroceptors, are going to be broken down into proprioceptors and mechanoceptors. Proprioception, mechanoception. A lot of people will interchange these. Sometimes people will confuse things. Probably the lay person is much more familiar with the term proprioception, maybe even though they don't know what it means. But proprioception and mechanoception are slightly different within the body. Proprioceptors are typically found around joints. So you have the joint capsule, and then coming into the joint, you might have what's called retinaculum. You have tendons. Tendons blend obviously into the muscles. So you have this muscle tendon junction. So muscle spindles and GTOs, which sit within that muscle tendon junction, are examples of proprioceptors. So they give that awareness to joint position sense is one of the key associations with proprioception. Shifts in joints, timing of a shift in a joint allows us to control our body and orientate ourselves in this external space. This is going to be different than mechanoception, which, if you think of it just from the definition of the word, mechanoception or mechanoceptors are sensitive to mechanical deformation. So we're going to find these on the palm of the hand and the bottom of the feet. We're going to go into them specifically of what they're sensitive to, but imagine if you are standing on something and you put pressure on your feet, you are mechanically deforming those nerves that is creating the stimulus so you can create a relationship with the ground for balance and movement. Now, if we start with proprioception, take a little bit deeper dive. I had already said that these sit much more around the joint. This is where you're getting joint position sense, center of gravity. So center of gravity of your body's global awareness is very important. Where is that center of gravity? How quickly can you detect shifts within the center of gravity? It's a proprioceptive response that is myofascial, connective tissue, muscle tendon junction. And then that is used to build an awareness of kinesthetic awareness. So kinesthetic awareness, a really good example is going to be that, imagine that you're riding a bike and you're riding a bike in traffic. So you're carefully riding a bike in traffic, and then you have two cars and you're going to ride in between the two cars, but you need to have enough body awareness and self-awareness to be able to look at the cars and see if you will fit between them. Or think of, you're trying to squish between a chair that's near a wall, right? And you'll be like, I'm not fitting in there. Or, oh, I totally know that I could squeeze between the chair and the wall. What's helping you to determine that is your kinesthetic awareness. Okay, and that is very important to connect to because we start to lose that with age, right? So how do we build kinesthetic awareness? It's through proprioceptive awareness and through that identity of self. Now, sense of force is very important. Force is related to strength and power, but it's also this sense of change. So velocity is very important as well. Typically, where you're trying to get someone to use proprioceptive awareness is related to their anticipation and the correction to shifts in their proprioceptive stimulation. An example would be perturbation training. So if you have someone who's standing, let's say we have a client who's a little bit older and they're standing with their feet shoulder width apart and you're essentially just tapping them, right? And they don't know when or what direction you're going to tap them in. You tap them, they suddenly have to sense that you shifted their center of gravity and you stimulated this kinesthetic awareness at a certain rate, and are they able to correct that, right? Or do they just totally tumble over? So perturbation training is a really good way to build that proprioceptive awareness. Now, this is different than mechanoception. Mechanoception, as I had mentioned, you find mechanoceptors in the palm of the hand and the bottom of the feet. These are the nerves, exteroceptors, that I'm particularly fascinated in, and that is the science of what we actually integrated into Naboso technology. What you stimulate with barefoot training and barefoot science is really mechanoception, which is why I take this unique fascination to these types of nerves. They are often underutilized because a lot of people will go towards proprioceptors and proprioception first. They're easier to understand. Now, your mechanoceptors, hands and feet, are found in the glabrous skin. So the glabrous skin, hands and feet, is different than your hairy skin, different nerves, which is then also different to what lies under the skin and the subcutaneous fascia, which contains more of these proprioceptors. Now, of the mechanoceptors, you have 4 main mechanoceptors. 2 of those mechanoceptors are going to be slow adapting, and then 2 of those mechanoceptors are going to be fast adapting. The ones that are slow adapting are constantly reading the environment. These are used in an example of I'm holding something statically. I'm holding my phone or I'm holding my coffee, and I can hold my coffee and talk to you and have this whole complex conversation and not drop my coffee. Right? That's fascinating to be able to do that. What is allowing you to hold the coffee and talk is the subconscious control of the mechanoceptors in your fingers that allow the amount of pressure so that this doesn't slip out of the hand. In a standing position, this would be quiet stance. So when you stand in one place, you don't fall over in gravity because there's a continuous reading of your environment and your center of gravity and the way that your feet are on the ground to control you. That's one of the most important postural controls, is static postural control. Now, the slow adapting ones are going to be used in that quiet stance and then holding something statically. Okay, this is as opposed to the fast adapting. Fast adapting respond to a stimulus and then shut off. So in the case of our feet, we have to be moving to stimulate these. Now, of the 2, stimulation and optimization of both are necessary because we need to be able to control both static balance and dynamic balance. Let's go in specifically of what they're sensitive to. Your SA1, slow adapting 1, it's also known as a Merkel disc, is sensitive to what's called 2-point discrimination. This is where some people will call texture, but it's actually not texture. So if you ever hear me say, you know, the importance of textured insoles is a way that the layperson can connect to really what's happening. But what truly is being stimulated by this nerve ending is the 2-point discrimination. Best analogy to this for your hands is Braille. So the 2 points and the distance between the Braille dots and the height of the Braille dots, that's all very specific, right? It was optimized to stimulate this Merkel disc. We obviously do the same thing with the Naboso insoles and mats. Now, the SA2, Ruffini ending, is sensitive to skin stretch. An example of this would be either you are on a rough surface. So let's say you are barefoot on a basketball court and you can kind of like stick to the surface of the basketball court, right? So there's kind of a tackiness. Or if you were on, I mean, a lot of the research is around textured insoles. So you're on like a Naboso mat or something. It has a rough texture, so there's friction, right? So you're either on the cord or something where there's a little bit of friction and then you get skin stretch. So the way that you use this dynamically and statically is that when we walk, you have not just vertical ground reaction forces, but you have horizontal ground reaction forces. And it's that horizontal ground reaction force that is creating skin stretch on the bottom of the foot. If you take your hand just as an example, the skin in the bottom of your hand and the palm of your hand and the bottom of your feet is different. Like try to lift the skin off of the palm of your hand. That's really different than try to lift it off of the top of your hand. Totally different, right? That's there for a reason. The skin on the bottom of your foot is really hard to lift like that because it tries to optimize the concept of skin stretch because you stimulate nerves when you stimulate the skin that is tightly adhered to all of the fascia and the muscles underneath it. which is really interesting. Now, FA1, FA2, Meissner corpuscles, Pacinian corpuscles, both of these are sensitive to vibration. Vibration is our sensory stimulation to dynamic movement when your foot hits the ground. So that is going to be ground reaction forces, are vibrations. We find mechanoceptors, not just in our hands and feet. Here's a bonus, hands and feet, not just is where you find your mechanoceptors. You find 2 mechanoceptors in your fascial web. Your myofascial web has 2 mechanoceptors. The 2 mechanoceptors that you can find in your connective tissue web is, first one, Ruffini ending. Let's go back so we see it. Ruffini ending, skin stretch, massage. When you get a massage, or you foam roll, or you're doing something that is stimulating the skin stretch, think like kinesiology tape or something like that. You are stimulating the Ruffini ending. And what's interesting is that stimulation of Ruffini ending has been shown to downregulate the sympathetic nervous system. It helps to get the individual into a parasympathetic safety restoration state of their nervous system. Think how you feel after you come out of a massage. A lot of that is because your nervous system is being stimulated in a specific way that you are now all nice and calm, right? Everything is safe, okay? You can utilize that with your clients as well through self-myofascial release. Remember that a massage doesn't have to be a literal massage, but could you be doing, I have my patients do dry brushing a lot. I love dry brushing. So I'll have them do dry brushing, which is technically stimulating the lymphatic system, but it's also the peripheral system, and it gets into skin stretch as well. And then same thing with cupping. There's so many self-myofascial tools that you can use at home that will actually downregulate the nervous system. Okay, that was your bonus. Oh, sorry, I didn't mention the other one. Sorry. The second one, the second one is the FA2, Pacinian corpuscle. So that means that your myofascial connective tissue web is sensitive to stretch, but is also sensitive to vibration. Okay, our entire body is sensitive to vibration. That's another area of sensory input that I'm very fascinated by. I'm fascinated by texture, 2-point discrimination, then I'm fascinated by vibration because all of your cells vibrate and that's how they communicate with each other. Your foot hitting the ground is vibration. Vibration travels through your entire myofascial web and it really is like the energy force of your body, which I think is really fascinating. Now let's take a journey into interoception because we have just finished the exteroception, the external environment. So now let's take a deep dive into the internal environment, interoception. If this is your first time hearing this word, this is going to be your perception of your internal state, your homeostasis. So this is a word that is often associated with interoception, homeostasis. Homeostasis is your equilibrium, okay? So your ability to reset to your baseline or where your equilibrium sits. Now, where my equilibrium or where my perception of balance internally sits is very different than my husband's, than, any of my friends, than Lindsay's, right? We all have these different balances or homeostasis environments that are set based off of our life experiences. And a lot of those life experiences happen to occur in our earliest days on this planet, right? They actually happen in utero, which is where a lot of them are established. But then the first 3 years of life is where a lot of researchers will say. And then if you've read Biology of Belief, Bruce Lipton, he actually argues that it's through age 7 that a lot of your foundational lens at which how you view the world is established is through the age of 7. Dr. Gabor Mate's work looks at more to the age of 3, but it gives you an idea that it is in the earliest days of our life that we are essentially establishing this. And then life throws you punches. Depending on life experiences, right? I'm going to have a different perception of internal homeostasis. Now, let's say you have a body sensation. I have butterflies in my stomach. I'm about to give a speech to 1,000 people on a stage and I'm starting to get butterflies, right? So I feel the butterflies, that's a sensation. And then that sensation goes to my nervous system. I interpret that sensation and then I put an emotion onto it. If I'm deathly terrified of public speaking, I'm going to feel butterflies in my stomach. My nervous system is going to connect to it. My conscious mind, it's actually within your limbic system, is actually going to identify an emotion to it, and I'm going to call it fear. I'm petrified, right? So I feel that I'm threatened. Goes back to survival. I feel threatened because I have a fear response around public speaking. And that then shapes our responses to that environment. A lot of people start sweating, people want to leave, they want to run, they get into a fight or flight state. Okay, that's interoception. When you feel palpitations, exact same thing, right? Now, these emotions are going to be really built around all of those perceptions. And the emotions, the root answer to those emotions is, am I safe or am I not safe? Your clients, your aging client is doing this every single second of the day subconsciously, or they are assessing their body for, am I safe or am I not safe? Okay, now where do we find these interoceptors, or these internal nerve endings that perceive our internal balance and homeostasis? Ooh, it is in your fascia, the organ of consciousness. I love that that is called that. I did not come up with that. I wish I did. The organ of consciousness. Now, your fascia has over 100 million sensory nerves. How amazing is that? 100 million sensory nerves in your myofascial web. I look at it as an extension of your brain. And I know that your gut is your second brain for anyone who follows gut-brain axis, right? And you need to have a good microbiome in your gut to have good, healthy brain. Same thing plays. What's interesting is that a lot of your fascia is actually visceral fascia, which means it wraps around your gut. So we're kind of talking the same thing. But your gut lining has millions of nerves, and then your fascial web has millions of nerves. So I like to look at, for my patients, their gut biome health when I'm trying to optimize IQ, EQ, MQ. And then I'm also looking at their myofascial web. Okay, let's take a look at how our fascia is connected to emotion. Your myofascial web is connected to emotion. Now, 80% of these 100 million nerves in your fascia are free nerves. What does that mean? Right? You have a difference. You have two main types of nerves. You have free nerves, which don't have any myelin, and then you have myelinated nerves, which, if you remember from either school or when you took your trainings, that the peripheral nerves, that nerves have myelin and then the nodes of Ranvier, right? And what allows them to kind of go faster down the telephone wire, right, is the jumping from node to node to node, and then you get like fast communication. So anytime you have a myelinated nerve, it's technically faster than a free nerve that does not have myelin. Something that's interesting, right? I have many aside bonus things that I'll save for the end that has to do with free nerves versus myelin nerves. But if we're looking at this, so when you compare the two, I'll just give you a bonus now. When you compare the two, a free nerve versus a myelinated nerve, the myelinated nerve is going to be the fastest response, and then you're going to get a slightly delayed free nerve response. So here's your bonus, You have two different types of pain. You can have myelinated nerve pain and you can have free nerve pain. Myelinated nerve pain is when you say you step on a tack, right? And you're like, holy crap, right? Sudden, right? Stab it. That's a myelinated pain response, right? Withdrawal. Now, you're not on the tack anymore, but you could still feel the tack, right? Like your heel still hurts where you stepped on it and you're just like, oh my God, my foot still hurts. That is a free nerve response. It took a little bit longer for the free nerve to respond, right? So your clients, or for anyone who has patients, your clients and patients actually have different types of nerves. And I dive into this when I see patients, especially with neuropathic pain, because some of it could be myelinated and some of it could be free. Okay, I'm done with my bonus. I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, so now 80% of the 100 million nerves in your fascia, 90% of those free nerves are interoceptive. 90%, a majority, almost all of them, right? So we get a ratio of 1 to 7 of proprioceptive, mechanoceptive, movement-orientated nerves compared to interoceptive. You have 7 times as many interoceptive nerve endings in your myofascial web. Interoceptive is what links to your internal awareness and your interpretation and an emotion. So your fascia, the way that I look at it, is that your fascia truly is an emotional organ of your body. So by helping your clients, the aging client, connect to their myofascial system is helping them to connect to their emotional system. And we cannot emphasize enough the connection between emotional state, quality of life, cognitive function, movement optimization. They are all so deeply interconnected. This is also where you could say movement or motion can enhance or affect emotion, right? Motion affects emotion. And a lot of that is because you're getting them moving. When you move the fascia. When you move the fascia, they connect to themselves. They feel themselves from a sensory perspective, and that can have an influence on their emotion. So it really is a powerful emotional structure versus, I know in the fitness and movement industries, we think of fascias, we have to foam roll the fascia, we need fascial elasticity. Your fascia is like a rubber band that transfers energy. Sometimes in your fascia you get itises, like a tendinitis is really a fascial itis, right? So I'm talking very mechanical movement based, but what about this powerful side of interoception and emotional influences that we can have based off of understanding that fascial connection? That's what I encourage you to do a deep dive. Okay, so now why is it so important to understand exteroception and interoception? Why is Dr. Emily talking about this? Well, it affects the aging client's mood, memory, and movement. Mood, memory, movement. Those are the big things that we're trying to influence by understanding our relationship to sensory stimulation externally and internally. Let's take a look at the mood. Okay, so interoceptive awareness. When you say that, what that word means is your interoceptive awareness can be associated with internal body awareness. Some other terms could be like a body ownership or a body perception, mind-body connections, right? So what is the level of mind-body connection between, that your client presents with? Are they very disconnected and they have a really hard time, standing up straight, and you're like, Johnny, lift your arms to the side, and they do a front raise, and you're like, no, that's the front, do the side, and then they do the back, right? Just you can see where that's actually a disconnect in body awareness. Do they kind of always trip over the curb, not because of having a weakness or lack of sensation in the foot, but they lack the greater body awareness that maybe they didn't even see the curb. Okay, that's how you can start to think of interoceptive awareness. How does that link to our mood regulation? I'm just going to read this briefly. So effective emotional regulation involves the ability to accurately detect and evaluate cues related to physiological reactions to stressful events. Do I get butterflies in my stomach? Do I get palpitations? Am I starting to sweat? Am I flushing? All of those that I'm describing are going to be my physiological reactions to an event, a stressful event. I perceive it as stressful, okay? And then there's going to be regulation strategies that influence this emotional response. Do I get upset? Do I get irritated? Do I get scared? Do I get anxious, right? What are we connecting to these cues in the body? Now, there is evidence demonstrating links between poor sensory awareness, interoceptive awareness, and emotional regulation. So how you want to start using that is that if you have an aging client that you're starting to notice that they do have a I don't want to say deficit, but a defect, a delay, alteration in their emotional regulation, could we look at both internal and external sensory awareness to perhaps help them anticipate the shift in their mood a little bit faster. That's really what we're dealing with. Okay, so there's a complex relationship between interoception and stress. Interoception and stress. Okay, and then both of these are related through the central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system, and is really built around homeostasis, survival, right? This is exactly what I'm saying. I'm just putting it in another way, that stress, interoception, and emotional regulation are all affected by that. Okay, now if you have a increasingly traumatizing event, then you will be hypersensitive to perhaps shifts in their body. They may be hypersensitive to shifts in their body. If you have anyone that you work with that maybe they're military vets, or they're former, first responders, or anyone who had a career that put them in the face of trauma, or maybe they had, a car accident, maybe they're a cancer survivor, right? So all of these are going to affect everyone's ability to regulate that homeostasis. And we want to see how we can bring sensory awareness to then optimize that emotional regulation. So now evidence of decline in sensory perception of the body with age has been associated with a decline in mind-body connection. So as I start to get neuropathy in my feet, I start to get a disassociation with my larger global body awareness, both internally and externally. What does that do to my fall risk? It obviously increases it. So how can we approach this in an innovative way, in a new way that's not being done right now, that is serving both the internal and external environment in these individuals? Now, there is something that is called a maturational dualism. So this is essentially showing that the weakening of mind-body connections influences emotional experiences and emotional regulation, okay? And that concept of maturational dualism, you can find research around it, but it's really tying towards research demonstrating and trends that demonstrate increasing rates of depression in this population. That is essentially showing that they are disassociating from themselves. When we disassociate from ourselves, we disassociate from the sensory input that is coming in. Now, let's say we have a client like that. How do we help them? How do we start to introduce this? The way that I like to do this with my patients and through my education is that we will do what's called body-oriented therapy. We are going to start to build a program around increasing external awareness and then internal awareness. So your two steps. We're going to start externally, because external awareness and exteroception stimulation it's a little bit easier for people to achieve and connect to, right? Where you just say, oh, I'm gonna have you start training without your shoes on. I'm gonna have you start doing dry brushing. I'm gonna have you, if you get a massage, I'm gonna have you wear the Naboso insoles. I'm gonna have you hold the hypersphere ball that vibrates. All of that is easy. It's a way that you can enhance sensory, but emotionally be disconnected from it. Where if you are dealing with someone who is really dealing with mood regulation, maybe a loved one passed away, right? All of these things are reality with our aging clients, that the emotional complexity, especially at a certain age, they might just be like, I just don't want to go down that route. I don't want to stop and look myself dead in the face and, really face those emotions head on. That's very scary for many people. This isn't just an aging client. This is for literally everyone. It's easier to start externally. So that's where we're going to start. Now, I like to look at the external sensations of touch, tension, and gravity. So this is how I like to build external body awareness in my patients. We're going to look at how we can access the nerves externally, the touch nerves, right? Hands, feet, of course you have hairy skin. Okay, so by having something in the hand, the nerves of the hands are exactly like the nerves of the feet. Am I going to hold a textured ball? Am I going to hold the hypersphere that vibrates, right? Do I hold a tacky ball, right? Do I hold something and kind of squeeze it hard so that I get the pressure? Am I barefoot? Am I on the Naboso mat so I get textured stimulation? Am I going to be on a whole body vibration platform? All of those are increasing external sensory awareness. And then when you're doing that, remember that we are still trying to tune them into the external. So you don't want them to just be blindly training barefoot. But let's say if they were on the Naboso mat and they're doing a balance exercise, you want to cue to them the fact that they're on the Naboso mat, right? So as they're standing there, you would say, I want you to feel the texture under your feet. If we're standing there, could you actually shut your eyes safely, right? Or being seated and their feet are barefoot on the Naboso mat. And I want you to first feel the texture under your feet. But now can you actually feel the differentiation, the subtlety of the different points that are underneath your feet, right? Now I'm doing mindfulness, or actually doing something that's quasi-meditative. They don't even realize it, right? But I'm helping them to do that by connecting to an external stimulation. As I'm holding the ball, feel the ball vibrate, feel the texture of the ball, feel how much pressure you're putting on the ball. This is how I would start to cue them. So you're using touch. Now you could also use kinesiology tape, rock tape, different athletic tape, that if you're doing it around a certain joint, let's say if I did it on the thoracolumbar fascia, since there's so many nerves on the thoracolumbar fascia, I would put the kinesiology tape around the lower back. Of course, it's going to give them awareness to kind of posturally, but the cue is external. But as you're standing here, again, you give the cues. Do you feel, I want you to feel how the muscles connect to the sensation of the tape on the back. Do you feel how, if you start to lean forward, it's like your muscles want to pull you into that more proper alignment, right? Something like that. Okay, that is touch. Second is going to use muscle contractions. So bringing in muscle contractions helps to connect the client to themselves through the myofascial web, which again, this is going to be a mechanical stimulation. The muscle contractions surrounded by fascia, so you're really feeling the fascia. If you do isometrics, so if I do, just squeeze my bicep hard. This might be harder for an aging client. So you could have them do an isometric with a weight and they're doing an isometric bicep curl, but connect them to the sensation of the muscle contraction versus, okay, keep holding it and then rep it 1, 2, 3, right? Totally different goal. They could be doing the exact same exercises, but your awareness driver through your cueing is going to be completely different. And I can totally attest to this as well. And I'm sure that some of the listeners, that by just moving or exercising or lifting weights, part of what's elevating your mood is that you feel your body again. You feel like yourself. You feel strong. And I know this was so important to me after I gave birth, is, I felt like I lost myself a little bit, partly because I was a new mom and opened a whole shaking of the world, but I wasn't able to move in the way for a long period of my pregnancy. And then after giving birth, that I was starting to lose my identity, my connection to myself. I was losing that because I'm so into connecting to my body. And then as soon as I started going back to doing aerials and doing a pull-up, and I felt like I could feel my body again. Okay, same thing. Just try to take that concept to any of your clients, but here we're obviously speaking about the aging client. And then the third way is going to be using gravity. So gravity is one of the best ways to bring sensory stimulation to your clients. Having them, and I know FAI is a strong believer in this, that instead of doing anything seated, try to get your clients all the way up, standing up. When I stand up versus seated, I'm in a more gravitational aware environment. So from a sensory rich perspective, standing is always going to have higher sensory than seated. Okay. Now, if you stand and you're barefoot, whoa, even more, right? But standing, gravity. Now, how could you increase gravity? Because we're really only in this 1G environment, so it's kind of hard to increase it more. But what if we had weight on the client? So I use weighted vests. I use wrist weights. And this is a way that I like to hack gravity or proprioception and the ability to help the client connect to themselves. A lot of this, you can look at research of various movement disorders, and when you have dystonia or muscular dystrophy and even Parkinson's and stroke, is adding in weighted vests and wrist weights and things like that actually helps improve the movement coordination in those individuals. There's bala bangles. Bala bangles is one of the wrist weights that it actually looks like a fashion bracelet. I know maybe a male might not want to wear that, but if you think of, it's not going to be like your mom's wrist weights, right? You could actually wear them to the store and people wouldn't think that you're wearing wrist weights, and that might actually help your client in the confidence of how they're moving. They can feel the arm. If I have a wrist weight, I can feel my arm as I'm reaching out, or I feel the leg because of that increased proprioceptive input to that limb. Powerful, powerful. And then the final way that I tie it in is that I like to do water work, because doing exercises and pool work helps stimulate all of the nerves on the skin. It helps to feel them connect to their body because of being in the water. I know that you're obviously taking away some of the weight, so there's a buoyancy, but you have the water on their body, which is allowing them to feel that, right? So it's really important. A lot of when you get children who have like brain injuries and cerebral palsy, like early stages, they will put them in the water to help the children connect to themselves. So that's a great way to start laying that exteroceptive foundation. Let's take a dive now into the interoceptive. So once we lay the foundation of the external, how can we start to connect them to their interoceptive awareness? Now that interoceptive awareness, this is where you could say, I know you're going to tell me to do meditation. Well, yes, that is a way that you can connect to your mind-body side of things, to your interoceptive balance and homeostasis, but there's other ways as well, because not everyone's going to want to do a traditional seated in one place meditation. There is a way to do that. I actually love sound baths. So if you do have a client that is open to that concept of meditation and an actual seated meditation, you may want to explore the concept of sound baths for them. It kind of enhances that concept of meditation. Now you could do a walking meditation. They could even just do a walk in nature and listen to, the wildlife and see the sunset or the sunrise. Concentration. So the concentration that I had said, where the eyes were shut and they were actually feeling the feet on the Naboso mat and the 2-point discrimination, that was a concentration, which was actually an interoceptive connection. You can have them kind of assess their body and see if there's tension anywhere. And if they feel tension in their traps, then, release the traps, feel it melting, things like that. And then of course, breathing exercises, where I incorporate breathing as a way to build pelvic stability for reducing falls. That is looking at it from a very mechanical way, but you could also incorporate breathing from an interoceptive way as well. Now, to take it even further, you can assess and then incorporate direct interoceptive awareness training with your clients. Now, the way that you assess interoceptive awareness, so how aware are you of your internal environment, is really the words. The way that you do that, or the way that the research does that, is through what's called heartbeat tracking. Heartbeat tracking essentially means that if I were to have you sit in one place with your eyes shut and you're not touching anything, you're just sitting there, can you actually feel your heartbeat? And if I had you count those heartbeats, would you be able to count them? So we're actually going to do this now, and we have enough time. So we're going to do it now. So what I'm going to have you do, and what you would have your clients do, is that they would be either in a seated position, or you, as you're listening, can go all the way down on the floor into a savasana. So you would be on your back, with your palms facing up, or you're in the chair with your palms facing up. Now, before you do it, I'm going to go into the specifics real quick. So what you're going to do when your eyes are shut and you're either on your back or you're seated in the chair is you're going to sense within your body your heart beating. And then when I tell you to go, you're going to count your heartbeat for 15 seconds. We're going to do it two times for accuracy, right? So you count, okay? And then after we do 2 times, I'm going to have you go to your radial pulse. Your radial pulse is just on the side of your thumb. You can tell here, right, here's my thumb, here. And you're going to try to not move the whole body. So you just want to, nothing moves. I'm just moving my right arm to my left and I find my radial pulse. And then I'm just going to actually feel my pulse, okay? And then you will count your pulse for 15 seconds and we'll do it 2 times and then you compare. Okay, so what I'm going to have you do, I'm going to set up my stopwatch and I'm going to have you get into the position that you want. And while I'm setting up my stopwatch, I'm going to be quiet so you can start to sense, feel, and find the rhythm of your heartbeat. Okay, here we go. Yep, so you're just going to start to find it. And when I say go, I'm going to have you count your heartbeat for 15 seconds. And again, we're going to do this 2 times. Getting ready. And start. Stop. And again, start. And stop. Great. So now find your radial pulse. I'm going to give you a moment to find the radial pulse. And then start. Stop. One more, count your pulse. Start. And stop. Perfect. Great. Excellent. So what I'm going to have you do is you're going to open your eyes. If you were in Savasana, you'll come back to wherever you are. And then you now have your average the 2 numbers or the 2 situations. So the 2 where you were just sensing your heartbeat and then the 2 where you were actually feeling your pulse. And then what you're going to do is you're going to compare them. So let's say I sensed 13 beats in the 15 seconds. And then when I actually felt it, it was 15. So call that 85%, 90% accuracy. So find your accuracy, okay? Now, based off of that accuracy, you are what, based off of the research, they consider someone who has high interoceptive awareness versus someone who would have low interoceptive awareness. Now, in those that have high, that would be an 80% accuracy or higher. And then someone who has low interoceptive awareness would be a 60% or lower. Now, the characteristics of someone who would have a low interoceptive awareness would be that if you set them up for this and you were to say, I want you to feel your heartbeat, and they're like, what? How am I going to feel my heartbeat without actually feeling my pulse in any way, right? That they're just like, that's crazy, right? Or I would have to actually elevate my heart rate for me to like, ooh, I feel my heart beating in my chest, right? And now, okay, I can feel that, so let me count that, right? But if you're just a resting heart rate, it might be hard. That's someone thinking low interoceptive awareness. Higher interoceptive awareness it is then shown in the research that they have a more accurate or faster perception of shifts in their internal homeostasis. Now, what this means from a mood perspective is that if I have high interoceptive awareness, the rate at which I start to perceive a shift in my internal balance is faster. So instead of having a rapid emotional response, I can consciously override that and control my mood and emotionally regulate myself. Someone who has a lower interoceptive awareness does not feel a shift in their internal balance and then the emotional attachment to that shift until they're already in that emotional state. Okay, we are trying to get from a mood regulation perspective is you have to be able to sense these shifts faster so you can consciously essentially say, okay, Emily, calm down, count to 10, it's okay, right? Or something like that. That's what we're trying to create within that, and that is a connection of your interoception. You can't try to regulate a mood if you don't detect a shift in the mood fast enough. Okay, that's an interoceptive name of the game. Now, memory perspective, cognitive. Okay, so what's interesting is that the research demonstrates that there's autonomic dysfunctions that may precede the development of cognitive impairment. So if you are trying to prevent dementia risk, Alzheimer's risk, just memory decline with age, or you just want, badass memory as you get older, you want to make sure that you are regulating the autonomic nervous system really at all ages, but as we're getting to this aging client, is we really want to make sure that they are able to regulate the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is really that shifting from a safe survival restoration into the fight or flight mobilization state. So how can we keep that balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system so that the cognitive function is protected by a regulated autonomic nervous system? That ties in, honestly, to what I was just saying about emotional regulation. Obviously ties into mood and cognitive function, but it really is, am I safe or am I not safe? Okay, so now your autonomic nervous system, we can take this even further in the way that you measure someone's autonomic nervous system function. A lot of people will refer to it as vagal tone. So you can measure a client's vagal tone. And let me take a step back. So broadly, this isn't exactly how it is, but I'm just kind of broadly go into it this way as layer one of understanding, and then we dive into it deeper in another course. If we're looking at sympathetic and parasympathetic, sympathetic is your fight or flight response. This is a survival response. You are starting to feel a threat and you're interpreting that threat as something that, can you fight it or do you need to flight it because it can affect your survival? Versus being in a parasympathetic state, which is your socialization and your restoration phase. This is where a lot of people will say rest, digest, right? But it's a restoration phase. Okay. Now, of these two, when we think of how the autonomic nervous system is balanced, the sympathetic fight or flight is like the gasoline on your car, where your parasympathetic, which is the restoration, is going to be the brake on the car. Okay. Now, to understand this more, let's say that you're a car going down a hill. So I'm a car going down the hill. I obviously have gravity that's helping me go faster. So because I have gravity and I'm going down this hill, I don't really have to push on the gas pedal, right? Because I'm going down a hill. I'll maybe just kind of back off. So what controls my speed is actually having my foot on the brake, right? That's what's controlling us when we go down a hill. My foot is on the parasympathetic system. Now, as soon as I back off of the parasympathetic, which is my brake, I start to accelerate, and the acceleration pushes you into a sympathetic state. Now, in order to slow yourself back down, what do you do to get you back out of that accelerated state? Is you put your foot back on the brake. So you put your foot back on the parasympathetic system, and then you slow back down and you're in a restoration phase. So the regulation of your speed, as an example, or your autonomic nervous system is dictated by the control of your parasympathetic system. It's essentially the parasympathetic system that is running the show. And 80% of your parasympathetic system is your vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve, which is cranial nerve 10, and is a wandering nerve, it's a very long nerve of your cranial nerves, is in control of your viscera and your diaphragm. It controls your vocal cords, your esophagus. It controls your facial expressions. Now, parasympathetic is vagus nerve, and the strength of the vagus nerve is essentially saying how strong is your parasympathetic muscle. How quickly can you get yourself from sympathetic to parasympathetic? That is based off of the parasympathetic muscle, which is referred to as vagal tone. So a client that has a high vagal tone is essentially able to reset their nervous system back to baseline quickly. And that's what we want. We need a sympathetic system to protect ourselves, but we need to essentially restore, get into the restoration phase quickly. Okay, so vagal tone. Now, another term for vagal tone, if we look at the slide, is heart rate variability. So in a lot of people, what you're measuring with these different devices that you can get, whether it's the Aura Ring, and some of them kind of connect to a heart rate monitor, and then an app, is heart rate variability. And then that equals vagal tone, which equals your parasympathetic muscle. Okay, you essentially would say someone with a high vagal tone equals good, right? Resilient. Or high heart rate variability equals good. That's what you want, okay? And that can be measured. Things that lower your heart rate variability, one of the first things is stress. That could be emotional stress, or it could be physical stress. It could be you're sick, you have, flu, COVID, right? You're a sickness, or you're an endurance athlete and you are overtraining, okay? And then that can actually, that's a stress event, and that lowers your heart rate variability. Now, heart rate variability, how this connects to the autonomic nervous system is that what you're actually measuring is this interbeat interval, and your heart is actually, it beats on its own without control of the brain. So the heart rate is dependent on the vagus stimulation to the SA node that allows it to contract. Ooh, sorry to make that confusing. Now, quickly to tie it back to emotion and mood, is people who have high vagal tone, high heart rate variability, strong parasympathetic muscle, have good emotional flexibility. Right? They're kind of the cool, calm ones, okay? But there's actually an association between heart rate variability, autonomic nervous system, and cognition. And that's what really a lot of the research is looking at, is can we dive in a little bit more to this neurovisceral integration, visceral gut, right? Neuro, obviously nervous system, brain, to see if there's a connection between altered autonomic nervous system function and executive decision making, memory. What is it affecting from the higher brain processing? And that's really the exploration that we want to look at and see if perhaps bringing in more sensory allows better autonomic nervous system function, allows better emotional regulation, allows a cognitive protective response. And we're looking at both internal and external perception, right? So heart rate variability is kind of this promising early biomarker of cognitive impairment in populations with dementia and stroke. So it's really important that we want to look at these and see if perhaps there is a protective response by better heart rate variability or better vagal tone in these populations to prevent cognitive decline. Let's take a little dive towards exteroception now. and we're trucking along. So write your questions down if you have them. I know that we are on the tailspin of this, and I will make sure that we get to any of those questions. Okay, so now how do senses interact with cognition? So here we go. Sensory processing deficit often precedes a cognitive dysfunction. That's where the research sits. Now that could be not just sensory being touch, but now we're also looking at vestibular. We're looking at visual. So visual, vestibular, and then somatic sensory all kind of interrelate within the brain. So this is a study showing, 2019 study, that if you look at seniors who are diagnosed with hearing loss, those who do not receive a hearing aid are almost 20% more likely to develop dementia than those who do get the hearing aid. So if you keep the sensory deficit of the auditory, what does that do to the cognitive performance? That's really interesting, right? So if I have sensory loss hearing and I have cataracts, now I have kind of this double sensory loss. What does that do? Does it compound my potential cognitive decline? This is an area that I encourage you to start looking. And then of course, cognitive decline affects fall risk, which is what we mentioned in the beginning, and this is based around the premise of dual tasking. So your ability to dual task or process cognitive or executive decision making with subconscious motor programming is really what dual tasking is. As we age, we obviously start to get a compromise in our ability to dual task. But let's go a little further. What drove that decline in the ability to dual task? What drove the decline in the cognitive function? Was it something like sensory loss? And if it was sensory loss that preceded it, how can we look at things like barefoot training and Naboso and whole body vibration and the sensory taping and mindfulness and meditation and breath work for these individuals to maintain that optimized cognitive function? Whew, that is what I'm going after. Okay, now another connection to our memory center, the memory center of the brain is the hippocampus. Your hippocampus, there's research that shows that high cortisol is your stress hormone. That stress hormone is toxic to the nerves of your hippocampus. So those that have, chronic elevation of cortisol, so many people in today's society have chronic elevation of cortisol, but maybe those with PTSD, some of these older military vets, and what is that doing to their hippocampal function? It definitely decreases their function. What is neuroprotective to the hippocampus is getting the heart rate up, getting some cerebral blood flow, and exercising. Let's go into the last one, which is going to be our movement, and then we wrap it up and we take some questions. All right, so body awareness and balance. These are the most common, obvious ones. Proprioception, mechanoception obviously plays a role in balance. If I start to lose sensation of my feet, I lose my awareness to the ground, I have a 15 times greater fall risk, and I contribute to the statistics I said in the beginning. So can we enhance external body awareness and perception of the feet and the ground and the hands and things like that to optimize our balance? That is definitely what we want to be doing. That is what I speak about so much in any of my education. And if you want to dive into this topic of body awareness and balance, or barefoot and balance and exteroception and balance, please check out EBFA Global. We have many online courses that are happening right now. We do free webinars once a month. Our YouTube channel has over 200 free lectures on everything foot, barefoot, fascial, foot, core, breath, for the whole purpose of relating to movement. Okay, so please do check that out. Now, if you want to look a little bit more as I wrap up, I only have one more slide, these are some of my recommended reads in this space of exteroception, interoception, body awareness, mood, memory, movement. Biology of Belief, I referenced that in the beginning. Waking the Tiger, this is an incredible book. Dr. Peter Levine founded Somatic Experiencing, which is essentially understanding and diving through the trauma cycle and how we can kind of exit it by looking at animals in the wilds and comparing how they process trauma versus how humans process trauma. When the body says no, Dr. Gabor Mate, accessing the vagus nerve. Vagus, of course, key thing here with heart rate variability and autonomic nervous system. Pre-parenting, this is a book that I recommend. This is not just for those that are looking to start their family, but it really dives into how mother fetuses and early emotional experiences or autonomic experiences are introduced to the fetus and into next generations. And it helps you to appreciate situations of maybe where some of our clients had started from. It didn't start with you. Again, it kind of explores this multi-generational concept of trauma. I explore this stuff partly because I'm just fascinated by it. Partly I do it for myself, and I wanted to do it before getting pregnant with my daughter. But I also do it for my patients because I see primarily chronic pain patients. So I am fascinated in the mind side of pain and the way that people relate to pain. It's something that is very, very individualized. It's very subjective, and I respect everyone's interpretation of their pain situation. And that's why I look at a lot of these, encourage you to do the same thing as well. And then finally, Somatics by Thomas Hanna is just a fascinating exploration of how we connect to ourselves. You can check out more at ebfaglobal.com to learn more about Naboso, which is the textured insoles and mats. That is naboso.com. Excellent. Woo! I will take any questions. I had my coffee, that's why it's right there.
Yeah, there you go. You know, every time I hear you speak, it's just, there's so much to learn, and the context. If there's any questions, we have 2 or 3 minutes, put them in the chat box. I will kick this off, and this is, honestly, it's a bit selfish. You know, we're at that age where we are sort of living through aging parents, and when we start to see cognitive decline, you know, I wrote down the question as you went into the cognitive and dementia part of it, but as you talk about integrating those simple cueing of that the exterocentric and the intero, is there a point, I guess my question is there a point where the cognitive decline perhaps is so far gone? The benefits of adding that in, does that make sense? I guess my question is, at what point, you know, is it ever too late, or how to even introduce that to get buy-in or to get them to comply with doing those things, especially if they're resistant? I don't know if that gives you some context.
Yeah, so when you look at different facilities that do work with, let's say, dementia patients or individuals, that there's a lot of research around sensory rooms, sensory rich rooms. And a lot of the purpose of the sensory room is actually not to increase the cognitive function, but it's actually to increase the emotional side, because of the complex nature of dementia and cognitive decline. It's very frustrating. They get kind of impatient, and they're kind of, I don't know, looking at themselves from an external side, and that's very complex. And I couldn't imagine what that would be like going through that, feeling out of control. It's kind of a control thing, yeah. So essentially, there's sensory rich rooms, which means that you could create an environment not at the decision of them that is more external. It's going to be hard to get them to meditate and do things like that, but could you use certain lights? There's a lot around light wavelengths, which I encourage people to look at as well. Like, is it all blue light? Blue light is very harsh on the nervous system, and lights that flicker are very fatiguing to the nervous system. So if you have more like an amber or a red light, or you can look at other ones as well, and then bring in, you know, different textures. Is there sound? Is it kind of lower frequencies create threat to the nervous system, and we don't realize that. So trying to avoid certain frequencies that might actually trigger them. That's where like certain bass tones are perceived as threat to someone and they might not realize that. So those are ways that you can modify the environment from a sensory perspective externally and positively influence someone in a way that you don't need you're not trying to convince them.
Permission or get them to comply per se. Yeah, fascinating. Dr. Emily, you always over deliver. Thank you for the tangible strategies and obviously just the amazing dose of information and knowledge. Thank you for all you do. You guys have her contact information there. I highly, again, not being paid for the plug, but I've used your mat for, I think I got it when it was in the beta test like 5 years ago. And I noted, I mean, just so significant. I'm obviously putting it in my kids' cleats, but just powerful, you know, and how you're able to explain the benefits in such a tangible and approachable way. So thank you for all you do. Everybody, thank you for attending. Enjoy the remainder of the conference.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.